Good evening, good morning to everyone. Let's start. What if your wallet carried a currency that the world wanted? Sounds empowering, doesn't it? But can the rupee truly achieve this stature? Or is this a mirage in the desert of global trade politics? Is the Indian rupee ready to take on the US dollar in the global financial arena? As the world moves toward de-dollarization, India is crafting its vision of economic sovereignty. But is this ambition a game changer or a geopolitical gamble? Let's dive into the heart of this fascinating narrative on the global focus with Hari Prakash Sinha. Let's welcome our today's speaker, Dr. Adityanjee. Dr. Adityanjee is the president of Council for Strategic Affairs. Welcome, Dr. Adityanjee. Welcome once again to our platform.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sinha, for inviting me to your platform. Namaskar.
Namaskar, sir. So I am moving towards my first question. Is India's ambition to make the rupee an international currency realistic or it is overly optimistic? So what do you say, sir?
Is it really India's ambition to make rupee an international currency? That is a question. I think I'm not an economist, but I'm still laughing.
Yeah,
I think with the geopolitical happenings, people get very emotional and very kind of jingoistic. So,
yeah,
yes, we are going to replace the dollar and this and that. I
yeah,
think the some individuals are carried away by that.
yeah,
Uh, Rupee is not there. Rupee is not going to be international currency tomorrow or day after or anything like that. People have been harping on de-dollarization since Ukraine war started and the
yeah,
United States put sanctions on Russia. And
yeah,
that's more than 2 years and de-dollarization hasn't happened. So let's get real and let's not become somewhat jingoistic or short-sighted. Uh, Dollar is here to stay. United States is here to stay. India is in no way competing against United States or against dollar. Yes, with the changing in geopolitical situation, you have to make best use of the situation.
yeah,
And it
right.
is also true that as India's economic footprint is increasing,
Yeah,
along with that, use of rupee is also going to change. Now, for the viewers,
yeah,
rupee used to be an international currency in 1947. Most of the people don't know that.
oh,
Rupee was an international tender in the West Asian countries, also in Malaysia, in Singapore, and rupee continues to be an international currency in Bhutan and Nepal. And at this point in time, there are 22 or 23 countries where rupee can be accepted as an international tender. That's on one level. And that number will probably increase as India's footprint, economic footprint, GDP increases.
right.
But it is not dollar versus rupee fight. Let me be very clear about it. So, and I don't think Indian government wants, rupee to become international tender overnight. It requires a lot of work, a lot of, organic infrastructure to make a currency international tender. The rupee is not fully convertible at this point in time. What
Yes,
the government is trying to do is, as much as possible, do some regional trade in local currencies and especially with countries against whom the United States has put sanctions. And this has happened in the past also.
you're right.
Uh, Iran, with Venezuela, we are not suddenly left with no option. You know, let's be very clear that dollar continues to dominate as an international currency.
Yes, sir.
Till Second World War, um, pound sterling, the British pound sterling was the international reserve currency. And there are still other international currencies, not just dollar. So there is euro,
Hmm.
there is Japanese yen, there is pound sterling, and of course, since the 2008-2009 currency crisis, China has worked very hard to make yuan or renminbi as an international currency.
Yes.
So that was 2008, 2009. It is 2024. Yuan has not replaced dollar despite Chinese government's efforts.
Yeah.
So I think we have to understand inherent limitations of the situation and not make tall claims because it will ultimately hurt the country and the nation by taking too many unsustainable positions. So no, rupee is not going to become an international currency tomorrow, nor it is advantageous at this point in time. Yes, it makes sense to have some local trade conducted in rupee terms with certain countries, and that number will continue to increase.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that world is static and rupee strength will not go further, but this will be a slow and organic process, not going to be done artificially by a fiat.
So, do you think is BRICS undermining the global financial order by pushing the de-dollarization?
I don't think so. I think world is too large to have only one way, one financial setup.
Yeah.
And we saw the the limitations of that arrangement with the unilateral Western sanctions. Not only this time, but even in the past, there were unilateral sanctions against Iran, there were unilateral sanctions against Venezuela. So we don't want to be in that kind of situation. BRICS wants to have not a competing system, but a supplementary system. And in fact, if you look at in the Kazan summit in BRICS,
Yeah.
Vladimir Putin himself said that we don't want de-dollarization. It's the United States that wants de-dollarization by putting sanctions on us so we cannot participate in international trade using dollar. So there's a hell of a lot of difference between the two situations. So and BRICS countries also don't have unanimity about, what currency they want to foster or prop up.
Yeah.
I can tell you that none of the BRICS countries except for China want yuan. You know, uh, you have dollar as one of the major currencies, but there are other international tenders also. There's a basket of currencies that includes dollar, that includes euro, that includes British pound, that includes Japanese yen and yuan. At this point in time, 88% of foreign exchange trade happens in dollar and 31% in euro and around maybe 16-17% in Japanese yen, 13% in British pound sterlings, and only 7% in yuan. So, yes, China wants yuan to become an international currency in place of dollar, but will that happen? It's fifth or sixth at this point in time.
Yes. Yes.
And they have been trying very hard since 2008 or 2009. So, having an alternative system for global trade is a good thing. But, you cannot artificially prop up a currency.
But the
Any
BRICS is coming up with a currency with related with a basket of currency of the BRICS member nations.
that again, that is a different approach. It's not going to challenge dollar or replace the dollar. That is what I'm trying to say. It's
Right.
an alternative mechanism. Yes, that's fine. The world is too large to have only one way of managing things financially,
Right.
especially when that system is compromised by the Western countries. There's no doubt about it that the Western controlled financial institutions, the SWIFT system, if you put sanctions on a number of countries, every now and then that is going to affect the world trade system. So you have a situation that West is misusing its financial monopoly in the institutions. And as a result of that, BRICS is trying to prop up a basket of currencies. So I don't see anything wrong with it, but it doesn't mean end of the dollar as international reserve currency, and that does not mean that rupee will tomorrow become the international currency as a challenge to dollar, which some of the analysts from India have been harping on that it is the end of the dollar. No, it's not end of the dollar, and rupee is not in a situation because it requires a lot of organic work in
Hmm.
terms of building up infrastructure and institutions. Rather than talking about this artificial issue, we should be talking about how to boost India's GDP, how to boost India's comprehensive national power, how to improve the exports, how to reduce corruption, rather than taking an artificial benchmark which may make you feel good but does not actually achieve anything.
Okay. Uh, Infrastructure that is really key to making the rupee an international currency. So, how do you think? How much do you think India will need? How much time it will take to develop a comprehensive infrastructure to support the rupee's globalization?
Okay, I'll give you the example.
Hmm.
As I said, China decided in 2008 2009 financial currency crisis to make yuan an international tender, reserve words, one of the reserve currency alternative to dollar. This is 2024.
Hmm.
So it's around
Hmm.
16 years, and still yuan or renminbi is not, in contrast to dollar, a major threat. And China is now $19 trillion economy compared to $29 trillion economy US. And if you look at India's GDP in dollar terms is 3.9 trillion, we are not even 5 trillion. So it's futile, it's useless to talk about India challenging the dollar and all that kind of thing. If it happens, it will happen. It will take some time. It will not be 6 months or a year. It will take maybe two, three, 4 decades. It depends how the economy is performing, how much percentage of international trade we have. Right now, our foreign exchange global trade is like 2% in rupee. That has increased over 10 years. I know over since over 2 decades from 0.2% to 2%. So that is a tenfold increase from 2001 onwards. So that's a positive trend. But 2% cannot become 85% in 5 years or something like that. So you have to be realistic.
Yeah, right. Uh, so, India should focus on increasing the bilateral trade. That would be a good way forward.
I think that goes without saying. And yes, as and when needed, the Reserve Bank of India has now, you know, allowed special rupee Vostro accounts with 23 countries. And
Right.
as the international trade increases and there's a need, I'm pretty sure on case by case basis, Reserve Bank of India will allow rupee Vostro accounts to facilitate trade with other countries. So the next country that might be is like Belarus, which is Russian Federation's ally,
Yeah.
and our trade is not very much. That's around 370 million. But so you will add Belarus also facing secondary sanction from United States. So maybe countries in the CSTO region, the former Soviet Union countries, it may make sense because some of them are allies of Russian Federation, and if we have to do, we can do in rupee term.
Yeah.
Similarly, some of the Southeast Asian countries, we can have, you know, rupee trade kind of thing, and that will slowly increase. So rather than focusing on making rupee an international tender, I think we need to focus on manufacturing and exports.
Right.
That is what will decide whether rupee becomes an international tender or not. So that would be my submission.
Yeah, right. So my the final question is interesting one. The de-dollarization, there is a lot of talk about de-dollarization. So is the de-dollarization movement truly a strategy for independence, or this is just a geopolitical posturing? So what do you think about it?
See, de-dollarization is slowly happening. Uh, but as I said again, 86% of foreign exchange trade is like, uh, still in dollar terms. There are, two-thirds of world foreign exchange reserves are kept in dollars. So dollar remains an international currency. It's the policies of the United States that will determine whether other countries accept it or not. And if they are not able to trade in dollar or something like that, they will develop alternative trading mechanisms because international trade cannot be stopped. Let me be very, whether it happens in dollar, whether it happens in bitcoins, whether it happens in gold bars, whether it happens as a barter arrangement. India and Soviet Union had a rupee ruble trade, starting 1950s con. That eventually stopped because Soviet Union was putting very artificial terms, very high exchange rate mechanism for ruble. You
Mhm.
know, uh, Soviet Union or the current Russian Federation has not been able to make ruble an international currency. So you need to understand what are the limitations. Even huge countries, the so-called superpowers, have not been able to make their countries. Germany. Germany had Deutschmark. Deutschmark never became an international currency because Germany was very realistic in that sense. And when they gave up Deutschmark for euro, they were to make euro into an international currency so that uh, German central bank does not have to take much responsibility, kind of thing. So it's a moot question. There have been change in international reserve currency, over a period of time, so that those changes are very slow. There used to be international trade in British pound till Second World War. That has changed. As US economy declines or there are structural deficits and structural problems, which there are in US economy, gradually the hold of dollar will decrease. But is it going to happen tomorrow? No. Those people who are doomsayers and saying that, all your dollar accounts will be wiped out overnight, I think they are not being realistic. So that is where we are. I'm pretty sure there will be another basket of currencies that will keep on emerging. And hopefully one day in this international baskets of currencies, rupee will join. But right now, rupee is not fully convertible, so it cannot even claim to be an international currency. But yes, uh, more trade in rupee in regional countries is advisable. So there's no reason why with country like Thailand or Cambodia or Laos or Vietnam, we should trade in dollar. So gradually in the Asian context, India can start, conducting trade in rupee versus the local currency of that particular country. It's costly to use dollar. So if you have an alternative mechanism and Reserve Bank is up to it, we should keep on doing it, but it will happen slowly.
Right. So thank you so much, sir. That's all the question I had for you. So thank you, friends. As we wrap up, remember the story of rupee is more than just currency. It's about India's place in the world. Stay tuned for more insights and perspective that matter on Global Focus. Subscribe now to never miss an episode where we challenge ideas and spark debates that shape the future. So thank you so much, Dr. Adityanjee, for your valuable time you have given
Thank
to.
you very much indeed, Mr. Sinha.
Thank you.
Let's hope that one day rupee becomes an international currency, but it's not there yet, and the advantages are not very obvious at this point in time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.